everyone, welcome back to another Exo Heroes video. Today we're going to be continuing our mini-series on Signature Force team building. And I'm not sure if we've really settled on calling it the Signature Force team building series. I think we can come up with a more clever name, but for now, it is what it is. If you guys have a better idea, let us know. For those who are just tuning in, this series is where we try to theorycraft the best team we can using only heroes from one nation. Signature Force has been a dominant factor in the meta since its introduction, and a big part of why it's so strong is the stat boost it gives when you run heroes from the same nation together. Today we're focusing on Greenland, so we'll be sharing our ideal Greenland-only comp as well as some potential mixing and matching with heroes from other nations. Hopefully, by the end of this video, you'll have a better idea of the best Greenland heroes, their roles, and how you can best incorporate them into your team. Really quick before we get started, we want to mention that this series will only cover the original 5 nations, because well, the other 3 nations don't have much to talk about right now, but as they develop, we plan on covering those as well. With that out of the way, let's get started. Since the beginning of Exo Heroes, Greenland has always had a place in the meta. Stemming from the strength of the original Bathory and FC Rera combo, Greenland has maintained a consistent spot as one of the best nations to invest in. A lot of Greenland's power used to be centered around Bathory's special passive, Tranquil, and while it is still strong, the true value of Greenland these days lies in the fact that it has some of the best and most versatile heroes in the game. As we discuss teams, we'll break it down into 2 categories, Core and Flex. The Core is going to consist of the 2 or 3 heroes that make up the heart of any Greenland comp, while the remaining slots can be filled with other Greenland heroes or strong options from the other nations. So covering the Core heroes first, in the front line we have FC Tantalo, and in the back line we have FC Bathory and FC Rera. Our flex heroes would include FC Talia and FC Uloom. Unlike with some of the other nations, the strength of a Greenland team is not 100% tied to Bathory's passive. While Tranquil is nice to have for all heroes and does give a significant boost of effectiveness to Rera and Uloom, Tranquil is really more of a neat bonus than it is a necessity. With that in mind, Bathory is still a key contributor to the Greenland core. Not only does she have the highest base attack of all heroes, which makes proccing Tranquil easier, but with her signature force, she gets massive stat boosts both flat and percentage, enabling her to deal massive damage. But Bathory is just one part of the puzzle that makes Greenland so strong. We can't forget about the best first Guardian unit, FC Rera. We talked about FC Xian before in the Uloom video, and he's definitely a solid hero, but as we mentioned, he's dependent on Dishearten to be effective, where Rera does an amazing job all on her own, and Bathory just makes her insane. Aside from the broken Dragon Blood passive, she also has Guardian Star, which makes her the fastest hero in the game, as well as giving her an extra life when she's tranquiled. Then you have the Focus Fire mark, as well as the accuracy evasion debuffs on her skills, and the Bite passive on top of that. In practice, this makes Rera great at picking off priority targets right at the start of the fight, and in later rounds using her A2 to supplement the crazy AoE potential Greenland has. FC Rera is a premier damage dealer with basically no weaknesses, which is why she holds a core spot. The last position is taken by FC Tantalo, bane of PvPers and harbinger of the stall meta. Ever since his core reverse gave him his 2 new passives, Tantalo has been a staple in most PvP comps. Naturally, being one of, if not the best Bang of Fate core at proccing Heartstrike already gives him some value, but the real reason you bring him along is the ridiculous amount of utility he has. He can buff ally attack and block, debuff enemies speed, attack, and defense, and blind enemies. But the most obscene part of his kit is the fact that just by existing, Tantalo reduces crit damage taken and grants damage immunity one time whenever an ally gets crit. The most important part of this is that the damage immunity has no cooldown, which means it works every time any ally gets crit. This translates to, crits can't kill anyone on Tantalo's team, and after you crit them, you don't do any damage. Combine this with the accuracy debuffs from Rera and Bathory's Tranquil, and you have a nightmare combination. With the core established, we can move on to the flex heroes, which are honestly still really solid. FC Talia is in the conversation for one of the best healers in the game. Throughout her kit, she has ways to keep herself alive, either through dodging or damage reduction. She has passive burst healing, which is useful in PvP where spike damage is common, and with signature force, she can pack quite a punch with her A2. If you already have Greenland core established, FC Talia would make a great addition to the team, and might even deserve a core spot for herself. The other flex option is Uloom. While she doesn't bring quite as much to the table as the other heroes, Uloom does have her niche with the walk passive. Nowadays, with people in PvP trying to avoid being broken through mixing and matching Guardian Stones, Uloom's ability to break 3 random stones at once becomes more valuable. Is it enough to justify bringing her? Well, that's gonna have to be a personal judgment call, as she doesn't have much else going for her, but if she fits into your team, go ahead. One last thing I'd like to mention before we move on to compatible nations is that with all that we've covered so far, it's important to keep in mind that those are just the capabilities of the heroes themselves. When you take into consideration other bonuses like Signature Force, Elemental Enhancement, Core Memory, Blue Fate Cores, and Unleash Potential, Greenland can take advantage of these bonuses like no other. Finally, we're going to talk about who you should realistically pair with Greenland. While the optimal split for other nations is typically 3-2, with 3 being the core of the main nation and 2 being from the sub-nation, Greenland is a unique case. As we've mentioned at the start, the strength of Greenland comes from how strong the heroes are. In this case, Bathory, Rera, Tantalo, and Talia. We have an expanded 4-person core, and in most cases it's better to run Greenland 4-1 and sacrifice the stat boost from the sub-nation in favor of running the main 4 core. The reason this works is because you may have noticed as we went over the heroes, Bathory has the highest attack, Rera has the highest speed, Tantalo is the best tank, and Talia is one of the best healers. When comparing this Greenland core to that of other nations, it is significantly more balanced and thus more stable in the meta. Not only is there a balance between the roles, but they also synergize so well with each other with multiple layers of defense, from Tantalo's crit reduction and damage immunity, to Tranquil, to Talia's passive heals, and Rera's Dragon Blood. This team seemingly has it all. So who fills in this last spot best? Our recommendation and the most common choice is FC Iris. She's been meta ever since her release as a Dragon Blood counter, and she has the added bonus of Summer's Blessing, which is ironically useful for countering other Greenland teams. Once awakened and with Unleashed Potential, Iris can do a surprisingly high amount of damage, so definitely consider going for Iris if you want the ideal Greenland comp. Some other solid options would be FC Annie and FC Shell. Annie's Burning Soul passive grants damage immunity, increased crit, and 3 mana at the start of every round. This allows Rera to A2 on the first turn, and it's just another layer of damage immunity on top of what Tantalo provides. This is extra useful if you have Greenland's Signature Force, in that Rera would AoE proc Summer's Blessing on the entire enemy team, thus enabling Bathory to follow up with big damage later. Shell provides similar value with her A2 being an on-demand turn reset, with a handy attack buff, 3 mana, and status effect immunity. In our opinion, Annie has a stronger buff, but Shell has more flexibility in terms of who to use it on. Ultimately, the choice is up to you. Just to wrap things up, some final thoughts on why Greenland is so highly regarded and why you should build it. Without spoiling our thoughts on other nations too much, we can reference the Uloom video which we've already done to highlight this. Uloom teams have the potential to be very effective. Even today, you can look at top rank PvP and see many of the strongest players running Racial Force comps. But it's important to keep in mind that these teams only work when your Rachel is stronger than a majority of the enemy team. This means that your win condition is largely dependent on the attack of your opponent, which is a factor you cannot control or account for. With Greenland, on the other hand, there is little dependence on Tranquil, and even if you do want your entire team to have it, you can tweak the stats yourself to ensure the passive hits everyone. This could be considered limiting, since you'll want to keep your Rera's attack lower than Bathory, but all of these factors are within your control, and the effectiveness of a Greenland team is calculated within the team itself, rather than relying on matchmaking to give you a favorable fight. With that being said, it brings us to the end of our Greenland Nation team building video, so hopefully you guys got a better idea of what makes Greenland so strong, what the best Greenland heroes are, and how to best pair Greenland with other nations to get optimal value. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. Stay tuned for more Exo Heroes and Genshin Impact's content. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Peace.